This is a little video on how to replace brake pads on a Kawasaki Versys 1000 2012 model with 4-cylinder brake calipers. So the pads used for this model is the 631HF by the brand Bendix or MA131. They're $49.95 Australian dollars, and you need two sets, left and right, for the front. So the trick is basically to remove this bolt here and that bolt at the top to remove that little spring there. Then the next step is to remove that bolt there, which is the pin that goes through and locks the pads into the back of the caliper. Undoing the bolts that hold the spring together might need a bit of force and it might snap a little bit. In this case that's not so. Let's try the top one. That's it. Now undo them further and take the spring off. Removing the top bolt will take the plate off. As you can see, it's always smart to put it down so that you remember how to put it back in. Now this bolt here is holding the brake pads in place, so the next step is to undo that bolt, which might need a bit of force as well. Make sure you put the right Allen key in there so you don't have any play in the head of the bolt, and then try and undo it, which needs a bit of force. Once the bolt has snapped, it basically will come undone. And as you can see, the thread is in the head, and once the thread is out, the whole bolt will come out, which basically frees up the pads. Put it in my little magnetic tray, and now you can take the pads out. There's one. Wiggle it around a bit. There's two. As you can see, the cylinders have come out a fair bit because the pads have been wearing down and they need to push further out to actually get the pads onto the rotor. So the trick now is to move the cylinders back into position, and for that I'm just going to use these pliers and push them back in. As you can see, the bottom cylinder has now been pushed back in, whereas the top one is still out. So I'm going to repeat the process with these pliers to push them back in position, and we have to do that times 4 because there's 4 pistons. Once that is done, there'll be plenty of room for the new brake pads to slide in, and then we'll put it all back together again. Both the pistons have been pushed back in. You may notice that if you push one in, that, like for example the bottom one, the top one will come out a bit, so try and put a little bit of pressure on one of the two while pushing the other so they both slide in. And now repeat the process for all four, because the outer side hasn't been done yet, so let's do that now. If pushing the outer side, the inner side pistons may come out a little bit, so try and push them all a little bit so you've got enough room for the brake pads to slot in. So here's the new brake pad. Obviously there's only one way for them to go in, which is facing the rotor, and they slot in just like that. And now this one with the brake pad towards the rotor as well, slots in just like that. And if it doesn't fit, like in this case, we have to push the pistons a little bit further out on the other end to free up this end. As you can see, the brake pads are now in position, and you may need pointy pliers to pull them back out a little bit to actually get the holes in the brake pads to align with that hole there, and put the pin back in. The pin has been threaded through the holes in the pads, and now it's a matter of just tightening righty-tighty, tightening this bolt here, and make sure you tighten it pretty fast. Let's do that. That should all disappear all the way in, and now tighten it. And that should be it. Now put the spring back on, and then we're gonna push the fluid back into the system from the top by pressing the brake lever a few times. When putting the bolts back together of that little copper-like spring, this one here, make sure you put one side in, don't tighten it up, and push the plate down a bit so that you can actually line up this hole here. Put the second pin in, and then tighten them gently until they're done. Once they're in and fully in, then tighten them both to the maximum torque, but always do it one at a time, but make sure you spread the force evenly. After changing both ends, the brake lever should now be very soft. You can probably push it all the way back into the handlebar like that, because you've now pushed the fluid out of the system up to the top. So what we're doing now is we're just pumping this back into the system, making sure that the fluid's back in the pistons below. And after a few, like now, the pressure is back in the system, which should make the brakes operate by moving the handle or the lever. That's it. That's the end of this video. Hope you liked it. Cheers. Bye.